Patriots fans, the 2022 NFL season is fast approaching. Will Mac Jones and Joe Judge, the new de facto quarterbacks coach? I know it sounds weird, but will they be able to coexist? And with the schedule release now a week in the books, who is the Patriots' toughest opponents coming up on this schedule? And has an AFC East rival surpassed them in the standings? I'm Mike Debate. We'll discuss all of this today. You are about to be locked in to the Locked On Patriots podcast.
You are Locked On Patriots, your daily New England Patriots podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all of you Foxborough faithful, and thank you once again for making Locked On Patriots a daily part of your New England Patriots coverage. Once again, my name is Mike Debate. I am your host of Locked On Patriots, and of course, you can follow Locked On Patriots on Twitter at LO_Patriots. You can follow me on the Bird app at MDABATENFL. It's Wednesday here on Locked On Patriots, so that means it's time to add a little class, a little pizzazz to the show. As you can see, my co-host today on Wednesdays, as always, is the illustrious columnist extraordinaire from PatsPropaganda, as well as her hosting her very own podcast, A Clare Perspective, a Patriots podcast, which, as I say each and every week, folks, is an absolute must-listen. Smash the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. You won't be disappointed. One of the most entertaining and informative listens anywhere in Patriots media. My good friend Clare, ClazzyClare Cooper, joins me from West Midlands in the UK. Clare, thank you for joining me today. Welcome back to Locked On Patriots here on your resident Lady of Locked On Day.
No, thank you very much for having me, as usual.
Absolutely. And folks, I know I haven't gone through the rundown of Claire's many list of names. You can find those in volumes 1 through 7. They will be posted on the Twitter account. No, all kidding aside, you know I'm going to sprinkle them in as much as I possibly can today, because the Empress of Tight Endage herself gave a master class, a true clinic, the last time that she was here. We talked about the tight endage position, Claire, and we really went up and down the board. Of course, right after we did that, the Patriots signed or claimed a tight end off of waivers. Matt Sokol coming over from the Detroit Lions, Los Angeles Chargers, Jacksonville Jaguars, a couple of tours of duty there. Probably not going to move the needle much, but we'll see. And we will continue to talk some tight endage later on in the process when we get to a little closer to training camp. But today, Claire, the question on everyone's mind is the Patriots assistant coaches and how they're going to work with players on the field, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Defensive, I know a lot of people are still screaming about Steve Belichick and his play calling abilities and how Gerard Mayo needs to take a more active role, but it's a lot of status quo on the defensive side of the ball. Not too much turnover. Can't say that about the offensive side of the ball. Josh McDaniels, Carmen Brasillo, Bo Hardegree, all gone, all in Las Vegas right now. Boy, I envy the three of them, boy. I really envy the three of those guys taking their talents out to Las Vegas. But the Patriots have brought in some familiar names, some prominent names when it comes to the coaching staff, but not a whole lot of pro-level experience at doing what they're going to be asked to do this year. Notably, Matt Patricia coaching the offensive line. In speaking with the coaches this week, Matt kind of unofficially confirmed that. He didn't really come out and say it. I know there's been a very common theme throughout a lot of these press conferences where they're not revealing their true titles, but Matt did reveal that he's working very closely with the O-line. But what we want to talk about today is Joe Judge and his role in coaching the quarterbacks. And he's mentioned several times this week that he is working very closely with Mac Jones and that the two of them are trying to develop that relationship. Claire, you've talked several times and made great points about Brian Hoyer being the de facto quarterbacks coach on this roster, even though he's a player, that role is going to be vital in helping Mac continue his development. Because say what you will about Josh McDaniels, I think we can all agree that he did a great job with Mac last year, developing him in his rookie season. Joe Judge doesn't have a whole lot of experience in this area. He played quarterback in Mississippi when he was, playing in his playing days, but not a lot of experience working one-on-one with quarterbacks. When you take a look at this situation, Mac Jones coming into his second year, Joe Judge kind of being a novice. What are your thoughts on this? How do you see this relationship playing out in 2022, maybe even beyond?
Well, as you mentioned, Judge hasn't coached quarterbacks, as people do mention. As you mentioned, he played quarterback in high school at Mississippi. But I mean, do we really believe that someone with the prowess and the football experience of Bill Belichick would put the fate of his potential franchise quarterback, the guy who heads the team, the future of the Patriots, in the hands of a doofus? I mean, come on, seriously? Is there a worry that Mac Jones is going to turn into Daniel Jones? I mean, I would really be surprised, but I guess there are some people that are concerned with that, in all fairness. So they've made that link. But seriously, Mac appears to be a very good football mind. He could be way better than we even realize at this stage. And I mean, than we know internally as fans, as you, the media, that kind of thing. I mean, there was this lovely rumor that I've read that Mac Jones was teaching Cam Newton the playbook. Now, obviously, that's going to have been refuted by Cam Newton, of course. However, if there is any seed of truth in that, it would sort of show how, football smart our current quarterback is. Not to mention that Mac with the helped Bill O'Brien with the playbook in college. I mean, come on, this kid has kind of old past his years, as they sort of say. So,
Right.
I mean, don't forget, as you touched upon, and I'm glad you mentioned Hoyer, because I'd got his kind of name down. Joe Judge isn't going to be the only voice in Mac's ear. I mean, let's not take away from the fact that this is the Patriots system, folks. And as much as he does get kind of like bad press, Brian Hoyer is a precious, sorry, I get the words there, a precious commodity in that system. 14 years in the NFL, that's nothing to sneeze at. Granted, several teams, but he did 3 years in New England, then a gap, and then another 4 years in New England. And in all fairness, when he was in New England, he was under several different offensive systems. He wasn't always under the same offensive coordinator. So he's going to be the most consistent of the voices in Mac's ear. He's also one of the most experienced, in all fairness. And even more so than a coach, as we kind of know, he's got that little bit more access to Mac's ear, as you like, than even Joe Judge will anyway. So they do say those that can't play teach. And maybe this is Brian Hoyer's speciality in New England. It's going to be that.
Know,
and I
some
mean,
people are going to say that.
I know we joke about it, and it feels a shame to sort of say these things, but we saw Brian Hoyer play. He isn't the best out there, kind of thing. But if any of Mac's success last year is to be credited back to Hoyer, and I know that I'm pretty certain that Mac sort of did credit some of his success back to Hoyer in sort of press conferences and things like that. I don't think I'm remiss in remembering. I may be, so if I'm remembering wrong, folks, apologies, but we all know that I've got a terrible memory. But in all seriousness, he's a consistent part of the Patriots way, and he's going to be there. And so when we're sort of not looking at, you don't need to look at sort of the Joe Judge, Mac Jones in a vacuum, because it isn't going to be in a vacuum. Yes, he could possibly be, if we put labels on it, which I know Bill sort of isn't, but if we do put the label on it that he is the quarterback coach, you would say, well, he's the most predominant. He's the guy that's going to be sort of telling Mac what to do and all that. But I don't think it's quite as cut and dry as that. So I don't think we sort of need to be as concerned. And as I said at the beginning, is Bill Belichick, the great and almighty Bill Belichick, really going to risk sort of everything by giving Mac Jones to somebody who isn't going to be able to, kind of grow him in the system?
Absolutely. I completely agree with you when it comes to that. I think a lot of people are misjudging that fact. And some are trying to maybe twist the narrative a little bit by saying, oh, well, yeah, Bill is kind of letting his ego get the best of him, and he believes he can wear every hat in the building. And Steve Belichick, his son, actually did say those exact words when we spoke to him on Monday. And he says, well, Bill wears every hat in the building. He's still the final say. And I think that's important to let everyone know that Bill Belichick still has the final authority on this
Mhm.
team. And
Of
that's
course.
exactly how it should be. He's the head coach, he's the
Mhm.
general manager. The buck should stop at his desk. But at the same time, you also look at the people and the coaches that he's now surrounding his team with. There's a common theme amongst a lot of what the coaches are saying this week. It's really all about the fact that they're football coaches first and foremost. And when I
Mhm.
look at Joe Judge, even though he's had his hiccups as head coach of the Giants, he's been a
Of course.
tremendous special teams coordinator here for a number of years. That special teams
Mhm.
unit that he had was among the best in the league every single time they took the field. That's not by accident, folks. That's not by happenstance. That's by design. Joe is definitely someone that's capable of getting players to play for him. But when you're a special teams coach, it puts your hand into every aspect of the football game. It puts it into offense, defense, special teams. You're coaching everything. You're coaching all of those areas, and you're involved with all those players. So the fact that he's played quarterback will definitely help him. I think Joe is going to lean very heavily on Brian Hoyer, like you said, because there
Mhm.
is that familiarity, that synergy. But at the same time, I also look at it and say, okay, well, Joe still brings stuff to the table. This is a former head coach in the league. This is a former special teams stalwart when it comes to coaching in this league, and also someone that is capable of communicating well. And say what you will about Joe Judge, the last 2 days I've had an opportunity to be in on those conferences, and he
Mhm.
communicates very clearly, very thoroughly, and very well. There is no question when you talk to Joe Judge about what his point is going to be. Very much unlike myself, he gets to the point, he stays right with it, and he really hits it head on. And I admire that. That's a skill that I try to aspire to, and it's a skill that he definitely has inherently. So see, folks, I made her laugh. That's one good thing I can do. So in any case, bottom line, I agree with you in your assessment with Joe Judge. I think it's going to be inherent upon Mac to be able to take that step as well. I think everybody is
Mhm.
missing the point, and I think you articulated it perfectly that at the end of the day, it's got to be Mac Jones that makes that jump. It's got to be him that takes the lessons that Josh McDaniels gave him and put them into practice. He's not quite the okay, I'm going to take you by the hand and I'm going to lead you. The training wheels are off. Mac Jones is a starting
Oh yeah.
quarterback in this league. He played well enough to get his team to the playoffs last year. That takes that aura, that mystique about being a rookie quarterback away from you. Now you have to go out there and you have to perform. I definitely think Mac is up for it by all accounts. He's definitely showing that on the field. He's showing that in the locker room. His players are saying that there's a level of leadership they see in Mac this year that they didn't last year, and that he's grown by several leaps and bounds. So I think that's going to be just as important. But for those of you that are squeamish about Joe, I get it. And I understand that a lot of you will continue to be until we see this team on the field. And I think it's fair game to question it, no question about it.
Sure.
I'm
Yeah.
not saying buy into it or just blindly go along with, yeah, and Bill we trust, and yep, that's it. Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. Just give it a chance. And I think if you give it a chance, I think you'll see that maybe these guys that are in charge are not quite the novices that you think they are. And I think the Patriots coaching staff will be just fine. Just my opinion, but we'll see what happens. Claire, it's always fun talking about these matters with you, and we've kicked things off here in style on Locked On Patriots. However, the schedule is now been out for almost a week. It was released last Thursday, and we've kind of delved into it here on Locked On Patriots a little bit. Murph and I have given our grades, we've given our thoughts, but today I need some wisdom and counsel from the lady of Locked On, the Countess of Claz herself. Will give us her opinion on the schedule, primarily whether or not a key AFC East rival may have leapfrogged the New England Patriots when it comes to the AFC East standings. I know we haven't played a game yet, but have they narrowed that gap or overtaken the Patriots as the second best team in this division? Claire and I will talk about that in just a moment when this Wednesday episode of the Locked On Patriots podcast continues. But first, Claire, we all know that this is a great time to be a sports fan right now. There's NBA playoffs, there's NHL playoffs, the Preakness is coming up. If you're a horse racing fan, there's just a lot going on. Football is not quite in full swing yet, but we're getting there. Everybody loves to be a sports fan. If you're listening to this podcast, you definitely love to do that. And what better way to continue or cultivate your sports fandom and to make a little on the side on that? Well, to do that, visit our good friends at betonline.net because they are your number one source for all of your sports betting stats and sports information. Find the latest developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs, the hockey playoffs, and, of course, Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Locked On Patriots listeners, listen up. Special notice here for you. In this competitive business environment, could you afford to have a portion of your workforce just sitting around doing nothing? No, absolutely not. It's just not feasible. So, why should your building be any different? Catalyst Power would like to lease that empty rooftop from you to build a large solar array. Generate a brand new revenue stream without lifting a finger or even being responsible for the installation or upkeep of that array. You can do something great for the environment, great for your marketing, and great for your bottom line, all at the same time. Catalyst Power will own, install, and operate the solar array at no cost to you. While your building won't receive the electricity generated by the array, remember that it couldn't be generated without you. This is the simplest way to achieve an environmental, social, or governance goal, all while getting paid. Eligible rooftops in Massachusetts and Connecticut are over 50,000 square feet of usable space and are relatively new, or with a scheduled repair or replacement timeline. Earn up to $1 per square foot per year in lease payments. Go to catalystpower.com/LockedOnPatriots to learn more. Patriots fans, it is Wednesday, which means a visit from the Countess of Clare herself, the resident lady of Locked On, the only guest that can add the class and pizzazz the way only she can here to Locked On. My good friend Claire, ClazzyClare Cooper of PatsPropaganda, and her very own Patriots podcast, The Clare Perspective. Definitely check that out wherever you get your podcasts. Claire, we talked a little bit about Mac and Joe and going back and forth and how Mac Jones and Joe Judge are going to coexist on the field. But ultimately, the Patriots' fate is going to be in the hands of all 53 players and all the coaches that are on the sidelines when the regular season begins. Thanks to the schedule makers and the powers that be over at the NFL who make a night of a schedule release, which got to give credit to the marketing department there, boy. I mean, to get a schedule release and make this a multi-day event is really just remarkable to me. But it is, and fans love it. We love it. I mean, I'm far from being complaining about it. I'm amazed that they've made this the event that it's become. Bottom line, the schedule is out. We know who the Patriots opponents are going to be. We know when these games are going to be. I know, folks. I know there's a possibility for flex and stuff like that. But for the most part, that schedule is set. And Murph and I talked about the primetime games earlier this week. Last week, we talked about some of the highlights that are going to be on this schedule. But one thing that stood out to me is the AFC East matchups this year and how the AFC East teams have really close the gap. For 2 decades, the New England Patriots ran roughshod over this division. Bill Belichick, Tom Brady caused a lot of sleepless nights in Buffalo, in Miami, and in Jersey, New York, wherever the Jets play. I'm sorry, folks. But you know what I mean. You know what I mean. Bottom line, the Jets have gotten better. I know I'm probably upsetting Murph right now by saying that, but they have. They've closed the gap a little bit. I still believe that Zach Wilson is going to take that next step. I know Murph has some harsh words for him a little bit earlier this week. I maybe didn't correct him the way I should have, but I think he'll be better. I do think there is, some talent there, and especially now with the talent that they're surrounding him with, I think Robert Saleh is taking that team in a better direction. The Miami Dolphins have definitely grown in terms of a team on paper. I see the parsing of the lips, so I'm going to give you a chance to kind of flush that out in just a moment. And I think we can all agree that until someone unseats them, I should say, the Buffalo Bills are still the class in this division. But the Patriots challenged the Bills for the division last year, challenged for a top spot in the AFC. This is not a team that's going to be run over without any question. Not when you've got Bill Belichick on the sidelines. These guys are not going to roll over. The big question, I think, in the AFC right now is not so much can the Patriots catch the Bills. I think it's whether or not the Dolphins have caught the Patriots. And they've had some, additions, whether it be Armstead on the offensive line or whether it be Tyreek Hill at the wide receiver position. Tons of new running backs in Miami. Mike McDaniel loves his fast running backs, and he's got Raheem Mostert over there. Now he's got Chase Edmonds. Now Sony Michel going to run. When you look at the Dolphins, and I know you don't enjoy looking at the Dolphins, I know it's going to be painful for you, Claire. When you look at the Dolphins, have they closed the gap, or dare I say, have they overtaken the Patriots as the consensus second place in this division right now?
Well, as you aforementioned, it's very difficult for me to look at Dolphins because, as some of you may know, some of you listeners may know, some of you may not, I really, really hate the Dolphins.
That's why I asked you this question, folks.
Yes, I know. He did this on purpose just to make me suffer, folks. So yeah, you know where to direct all the not very nice men. I'm only joking. I would not ask you to do that at all. But yes, I am not a big fan. Yes, of course, there's AFC East rivalry, as there always is. So I do genuinely hate the Finns, the Bills, and the Jets as well. But in a different order to some Patriots fans. I hate the Dolphins because it was my first ever game at Gillette Stadium. My only, unfortunately, at the moment, but touch wood, it won't be. But my first game at Gillette Stadium, we played the Finns and they beat us, and it was terrible because then we didn't get the bye. This was the end of 2019. So the Patriots didn't get the bye. So then they moved on to play the Titans, and then they got knocked out, and blah, 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 blah. So I hate the Dolphins. Passionately, I hate the Dolphins. I passionately hate the Bills as well. So we'll get onto that in a little bit, folks. But still. As you mentioned, the Finns coach, I mean, he looks great, but we just don't know. I mean, who's to say at this very point who's going to be what? Because on paper, the Finns, yes, they seem good. All the names that you mentioned, Tyreek Hill, you kind of missed out the Jalen Waddle, his second year, very good player. They re-signed Gesicki, tight endage. I've got a massive respect for him. He's a very good tight end, even if I do hate the fact that he's a Dolphin. Mike Gesicki, very good tight end. So there's also history. History isn't on the Patriots side here. I mean, last season, the Finns beat the Patriots in both meetings. In the first of probably something like 20 years, I think, if my research was correct. But I mean, what you haven't touched upon, I know you mentioned the Bills, and I'm glad you did, because this feels like more of an AFC East discussion than just a Dolphins discussion, in all fairness. The loss of Dable could hit the Bills in quite more than expected, because we're talking here, as we mentioned in the previous segment, how the Patriots are going to suffer under a new offensive coach, particularly Mac Jones. We just, that was more quarterback coach, but yeah, particularly Mac Jones. Surely that you could say the same unrest situation is in Buffalo with their new offensive coordinator leaving for a head coach with their previous offensive coordinator leaving for a head coach job. So you're actually putting them in basically the same kind of situation as the Patriots. Yet you're not sort of saying, oh, well, are they going to still be as good? Granted, they've got different weapons to the Patriots. They've got a quarterback that's been in their system for a longer time, but you've still got a team in a situation of, shall we say, unrest, if you like, for want of a better phrase, because they've got some coaching differences. Now, you've got to look at the Jets as well, as much as Murph never wants to. And that's just because he doesn't like babyface Zach Wilson. He's just got a problem with him because he's, a little cutie guy. Not really my jam, but, that's what Murph always calls him. So I know he's got an issue with him, and just Jets in general as well. So, yeah, fair enough. But you've got to look at them as well when you look at the AFC East. And they drafted really well. Well, you could argue they drafted really well with Sauce Gardner, Jermaine Johnson II, Garrett Wilson, and they even took one of the tight ends that I thought was really good in regards to Jeremy Ruckert. Now, I know he wasn't a top tight end, but he's still the tight end that they took that I really liked because he looks really good. So, hold your hat on that one, folks. But you still got Zach Wilson at the center of it all. Now, I have heard that he has beefed up in the off season from another podcast that I like to listen to that covers the whole of the NFL. Apparently, Zach Wilson has done some work on himself in regards to that. But you're still looking at, and I know you kind of put positives towards the organization, but you're still looking at an organization that haven't had the best record. I mean, last season they went, what did they go? Oh, I thought I'd got it written down. I haven't. Never mind. We'll move past that, shall we, folks? Yeah, we'll forget that bit. But I mean, the AFC is definitely in flux at the moment. Sorry, the AFC East is definitely in flux at the moment with all the changes at the coaching staff. So you can't, if you're going to put that onus on the Patriots in regards to, their offensive staff is in disarray or whatever, you're looking at the same situation in regards to the Bills, and you've also got a new coach in as the Finns, and you've got the same organisation that you had previously that had a bit of unrest. So, in all fairness, not to sort of dodge your question, because it kind of looks like I am, but the AFC East to me, I don't think you can look at this moment of, oh, well, they're above them, or the Finns are catching the Patriots, because I think it's too difficult to say at this point in regards to you're sort of judging the Patriots with their coaching unrest. We need to judge the Bills as well. So the Bills definitely going to be at the top, because you're going on what you looked at the Bills for last year. Well, this Bills team isn't the Bills that we saw last year, because they've got different coaching staff and things like that. So I think it's too much of a disarray. And I'm not very good at saying like the Finns are better than the Patriots anyway, even if they are, because I hate them so much. So you're catching me on you're looking at the fanness of me now, and the irrational fandom, shall we say? So to be fair, I don't think at this point, in honestly, in all seriousness, I don't feel at this point you can put them in an order, because I think there's been too many different changes, and like we said, the additions that the Jets have had, you'd put them at the bottom, but would you still, that kind of thing. So I think it's a question that can't actually be answered at the moment, and I'd like to put a pin on it and come back to me in a couple of games into the season.
Okay, fair enough. We'll definitely put a pin in that one, and we will come back to you on that. No, all kidding aside, I think you make some great points. I did tip my cap to you when you mentioned Brian Daboll, and you mentioned his absence now, and a new coordinator coming in Buffalo. It's an uncertainty. There's no question about it. I mean, and it's something that to ignore it and just treat it like it doesn't exist is not doing it a service. Anytime a new coordinator comes in, anytime that you have a quarterback that has the synergy that Josh Allen had with Brian Daboll and try to replace that, it's going to be difficult to do so. Now, the one area where I will say that may not be a like-for-like comparison when it comes to Mac Jones is Josh Allen has a few years on Mac. He's more of a seasoned veteran.
Of course.
He's been around the league a little bit more. He's seen most of these teams now. He's been to the playoffs. He's been battle-tested into championship games. So he's got a little bit more battle-tested metal in him, and I think he'll adapt to that a little bit better than someone without as much experience like a Mac Jones. Now, the other part of that is that Mac has a meticulous ability to prepare for games. He's known for it, and he does have an ability to read defenses. He, is a student of the game, picks things up very quickly, and that will, I think, be a feather in his cap. So maybe you're looking at a wash in a situation like that at best, but I think it's a good point that you made, and I'm glad that you made it. Yes, I'm hearing the same things on Zach Wilson as well, that he did beef up a little bit in the offseason. Maybe that helps him. Before I get to my points on the Dolphins, I noticed that you had a little bit of a thought there. And you can come back at it.
Something that I wanted to say in regards to so Josh Allen obviously is more seasoned in that system. That could work as a negative, because it could be that Mac is more pliable. He's younger. He's not used to the systems as he's been. So he could actually sort of adapt to the changes in regards to coaching that maybe Josh Allen would have a few more issues now, I'm not saying this is true. I'm just saying a possibility, because Josh Allen's been in it for longer. He might actually find the transition of a new coordinator, of a new offensive caller, that kind of thing, actually more difficult than someone like Mac Jones. So it could actually rebalance the scales, and you could actually find the Patriots on top, then the Bills, then the Finns, then the Jets.
It's definitely possible, and I'm glad that you made that point. That is a very good point to make, and it could have a ripple effect. It could end up benefiting Mac, because he is a little bit more susceptible to coaching. He is a little bit more accepting to that, and he's still learning the game at the pro level. So that may end up working to his advantage. Sometimes someone as seasoned as Josh Allen, even though he's not a grizzled veteran in the league, he's been around a few years now. Sometimes you get set in your ways. It's difficult to be able to adapt. Some of the great ones have been able to do it. We'll see if Josh Allen belongs in that conversation. He's definitely trending in that direction, but you won't really know until he actually gets something of tangible, winning, I should say, any type of tangible windfall, and then we'll be able to put him up in that echelon as well. So good stuff when it comes to that, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. Quick point on Miami before we move on. I think one of the reasons why everybody loves the Miami Dolphins right now on a national level is because of all of the offseason acquisitions that they made, primarily Tyreek Hill. That kind of put them on the map, and people wanted to look at that and say, wow, boy, Miami's going for it. They're going all in. They're pushing all their chips on the table right now. Ultimately, I think Miami's going to go as far as two entities that have been in Miami right up until this point. I don't think it's the offseason acquisitions that necessarily are going to move the needle for them. It's going to be, first of all, Miami's defense, which is very good. If they come out and they play as well as they did last year, they have a very good chance of contending for a playoff spot, maybe even nipping at the heels of the Patriots or maybe even the Bills for the division. But ultimately, it's going to come down to Tua Tagovailoa. Is Tua the quarterback that Miami Dolphins fans hope he is? Some Miami Dolphins fans, I should say. Not everybody is on the Tua bandwagon down there. But is Tua going to be able to lead this team? They've certainly surrounded him with all the weapons he should need in order to be successful. They've beefed up the O-line. They've given him talented receivers. You mentioned Waddle. I didn't mention him earlier because he's not a new acquisition, but you can make the argument he's the best receiver on that team. I'm glad you mentioned him. I mean, they've given him a core of running backs that he can do an awful lot with. He's got one of the better tight ends in the league in Mike Gesicki. He has all of the necessary intangibles to be able to succeed. If that offense is not clicking on all cylinders, then you have to look at the common denominator, and that, unfortunately, for Tua is always going to be the quarterback, and he's going to bear the brunt of that. So if he comes out, has a good season, then yeah, Miami's going to be a tough out for the New England Patriots. That's going to be a dogfight for that second spot. But if Tua does not come out and play well and he struggles, that's going to fall squarely on his shoulders. And then I think you're looking at the Patriots probably being the best team to possibly challenge the Bills for unseating them in the AFC East.
I can't believe you missed an alliteration. You said the Tua bandwagon, and you should have said the Tua train.
The Tua train, that's it. Unfortunately, see, I'm slipping, Claire, and that is why the Countess of Claz always joins me here on a Wednesday to bring me back in. Just when I thought I was out, she pulls me back in. So in any case, folks, now that we've talked AFC East, now that we've talked Mac Jones, we're going to get Claire's perspective. I got that one. We're going to get Claire's perspective now on the schedule and the New England Patriots' ability to be able to contend within this schedule. What does Claire think of the schedule, and what are some of the toughest opponents or toughest matchups that the New England Patriots have on this 2022 season slate? We'll talk about that in just a moment when this Wednesday episode of Locked On Patriots wraps up. But first, Claire, summer is coming. The weather up here in New England last weekend was absolutely summer-like. It's going to be downright summer-like this weekend. Temps in the 90s are expected, folks. And I know everybody's going to be loading up their car, heading toward the beaches in New England. With summer, you're going to need some food on the go. You're going to need energy to keep going for all those summer days and summer nights. And Built Bars are the perfect snack to take with you on those family outings, vacations, wherever you're headed. Throw them in your bags, in your kids' backpacks. Make sure that everyone has a bar so you're fueled for all of your summer adventures. The best part about Built Bars, folks, is that they're healthy and they're delicious. You don't have to sacrifice taste any longer for a healthy, nutritious treat. With Built Bar, you definitely have both, and it's easy. All you have to do is go to Built.com and order now. And some of the amazing products that they have out there right now, you're going to love them. The Built Puffs are great for summer. Actually make a very good s'more. Put them in between a couple of graham crackers. You will definitely not be disappointed. The birthday cake Built Puffs right now are out there. I'd highly recommend trying those. Built's got granola bars. They're traditional Built bars. Every product they put out is delicious. And the best part is, folks, is that they're good for you. So don't delay. Do it today. Visit Built.com and enter the promo code LOCK15 for 15% off your next order. That's Built.com, promo code LOCK15, Built.com. Patriots fans, it's almost time to wrap things up here on Locked On Patriots. Each and every Wednesday, I have the esteemed honor and the privilege of being joined by our resident lady of Locked On, the Empress of Tight Endage, the Queen of TE, the Baroness of Blockers, the Principal of Positivity, and the Countess of Claz. I told you I'd get them all in. Claire Cooper joins me here today, as she always does. Columnist extraordinaire, podcast host extraordinaire from PatsPropaganda.com and a Claire Perspective, a podcast. Claire, we've talked a lot about the Patriots and their place in the AFC East and what's going to happen between Mac Jones and Joe Judge. But when it comes right down to it, the Patriots' fate of the season, like I said to open the last segment, is going to come down to the games on the schedule. Can they win more games than they lose? Can they get into the playoffs based on their season schedule? Most of it depends on the team that they put out on the field. But if we're being honest, the schedule has a lot to do with it as well. Do they draw easier opponents? Do they draw tougher opponents? How are we going to determine the Patriots season? When you look at the schedule, top to bottom, what are the games that stand out to you? What do you think are going to be some of the toughest matchups for the Patriots heading into this 2022 season slate?
Well, I'm glad you specified for the Patriots, because if you just asked the question very generally, I would say to you, the later stint of the season is going to be very difficult for us UK people because of the whole 8:20, 8:15, 8:15 and 8:20 games. It's going to be very difficult for us Patriots fans. I don't know about the actual Patriots themselves, but us Patriots fans after the bye have got a really hard stint. So all you US people, please do send some good karma and some best wishes.
And some coffee.
And some coffee, exactly, to us UK people dealing with the kind of weeks 12, 13, 14 and 15, because it's going to be tough, folks. But from a Patriots perspective, because that's what we are, I had a look at this and I found this really interesting in regard to the schedule, however you want to pronounce that word, because I love how there's difference in English language when it comes to American English. But still, I had a look at this and I found this very interesting because there was a lot of teams that you would say have got not necessarily unrest, more uncertainty. Yeah, uncertainty at their quarterback position, which obviously, looking at the NFL in general, looking at football in general, you kind of look at that as the starting point. Yes, the quarterback isn't the whole team. We all know this as fans. We all know this as Patriots fans, as any fans, as any sports fans. You know that if it's a team sport, it's the sum of the parts. It's not just one entity. But you always look at the quarterback first, and you always look at the strength of the quarterback first, which is why you kind of give the whole Tom Brady the GOAT. Even when the Patriots weren't as good as the team as a whole, they had Brady to kind of carry them a little. Not completely. I'm still very much it's a whole team. So when you look at the schedule, I don't know which way to say it now. On the whole thing, there's a lot with the sort of the difficulty, uncertainty at quarterback. So the Steelers with are they going to take their are they going to use Kenny Pickett initially? Or are they going to go the Trubisky route? I mean, you're looking at a very different team in regards to not having Ben Roethlisberger there, who's been, such a long time continuing entity. Ravens, now very passing team, very injured prone at running back, very significant. Big weakness there. The Packers, they've still got Aaron Rodgers. As much as I can't stand the man, as much as I genuinely sorry Packers fans, sorry, just really can't stand that guy. It does pain me. I do find it very difficult to have this sentence come out of my mouth. He's not a bad quarterback. He's quite a good quarterback. Now, I know you have me recorded saying that, but I probably won't say it again for a very long time. So if you heard it, folks, you aren't going to hear it again for a while, just because I don't like him so much. So, yeah, that
I got the snippet, folks. Don't worry.
I think it's that's gonna be a win. In all fairness, the Lions. Now I've got a little bit of for the Lions because their head coach, he seems so passionate and stuff like this, and they drafted quite well, but they had a 3-13 season last year, so I think they're still in the pains of having to sort of build themselves back up. So I kind of pin that down as not quarterback unrest, although I don't know how much people like Jared Goff, in all fairness. I mean, I'm not, he's not high on my list either. So it's not unrest at quarterback, but is it kind of talent at quarterback? I'm glad this isn't a Ram show or Lion show because I get in right trouble. The Browns, they don't necessarily know who's going to be their quarterback. We all know that they've took on the whole Deshaun Watson thing, but we don't know whether he's going to be playing, if he's going to be allowed to be playing, is it going to be penalized? So unrest for them. The Bears. Justin Fields, rookie, came in. I heard so much good stuff about him from some of my friends, and I wasn't convinced. Not sure how convinced they are, in all fairness. So, they did a 6-11 last year, so not too sure about those. You've got the Colts, Matt Ryan, distinguished quarterback, good quarterback, in a new system quarterback, older quarterback in a new system. So, you're talking more new. There's a lot of teams that have got a lot of new. And I'm not saying this is unusual, but looking at the schedule, when you look at it as a whole, there's a lot of teams that have got a lot of uncertainty. The Vikings, okay, they haven't made a change, but the Vikings are the Vikings, so. And then Cardinals, is Kyler Murray coming back? Wasn't this a big off-season thing for people that tend to watch non-Patriots NFL sort of podcasts, TV shows, that kind of thing?
There was
a lot going on with if he's going to be a Cardinal or not. So,
yep.
When things are sour in the house, you don't really think that it's going to really perform that great. You don't know. He might be happy. He might be fine because they put on a brave face and say it's all great. But and I know that doesn't actually reduce the performance of the team, granted, but it's still, when you've got a situation like that, it's just not nice, is it? And you kind of want things to run like a well-oiled machine. And if you've got a part that's got a little bit of unrest in regards to that, it isn't necessarily going to work that way. So again, a very good team who have lost one of their they've lost one of their weapons in. Oh no, his name's gonna. Oh, and I think he's really good. DeAndre Hopkins. He's on suspension for the first 4 or 6 games. And yes, again, he's just the sum of parts. He's not the whole team, but he's a very good weapon, as people like to say. Mm-hmm. So you've got a loss in utilization of that going forward. The Raiders now, yes, on paper, this Raiders team could be really good. But you have a new team under new management. And it's not a slant on Josh McDaniels, because we all know what a great offensive coordinator is. Is he going to be a great head coach? Has he got what he needs to make a great team in the Raiders? On paper, possibly. But again, it's all new. It's all inconsistent for them. And then the Bengals, they're the ones that I think are really good. And if that kid's got a good offensive line, I think he's going to really go places. But that poor kid ended up on his butt so many times last season that I really hope that in regards to his offensive line, although they took Ted Karras, so I don't like them very much. So, in conclusion, I think the schedule is really so much out there, more than what we would think just by looking at the names, simply because the teams have got all those changes that I just mentioned, that I just listed for you. I really hope I didn't bore any of you folks. I really hope you found that as interesting as I did, because I found it really interesting looking into that. I don't see many as a given, in all fairness, to look at it. Even Buffalo, which I know last season, they were a great team. I'm still saying that was last season, and that was under Dable, and it's different now. So I think looking at the whole list of everybody that the Patriots are going to play, there is so many teams that have so many internal issues of their own that they're dealing with, that I think it kind of puts the Patriots ones in a little bit of a shadow, in all fairness, because they've got that quarterback. They've got him growing, that kind of thing. They've still got the coaching, Bill Belichick. So they've still got some very significant pieces there that these other teams that the Patriots are going to be playing don't, and have got changes to. So I think, in all fairness, as much as we kind of like to tick off, we think that's a definite win. It's difficult to be decisive when you haven't seen any of these teams play this season anyway, of course. So you don't really know. You could say, oh, well, the Packers are great because they've still got Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, but the rest of the team could completely fall apart, and you won't know that until you see it in the season. And granted, so that's why, we're all just speculating when we say they're going to go 10-7 or 11-6 and all that kind of thing. But I think something that I've noticed for this year that I do find interesting is the way that so many teams have got so many changes, as I mentioned, so many things to contend with, to deal with in regards to quarterback, that I don't really see it very easy to put any of these down as a given, other than the Patriots need to be in the Jets. So.
Well, I hope that's a given. New England right now, when you look at this schedule, and obviously a lot of eyes are going to be on the last 5 games of the season, really the last 6 games of the season. When you think about starting on December 1st, when they take on the Buffalo Bills on a Thursday night, that's going to be a gauntlet of games that is going to be so important for the Patriots to be able to win. You come home to play Buffalo, 2 on the road, Arizona and Las Vegas. Both of those games are going to be on the road. Patriots reportedly going to stay on the West Coast for those games. They're not going to make the trip back and forth.
Yeah.
That may make things a little bit easier. I like the points that you made on Arizona, because this is a team that I think a lot of people were enamored with early last year. They kind of petered off a little bit toward the end of the season, and then some off-season question marks. We don't know if Andy Isabella is going to still be there. How are they going to be able to, Chase Edmonds no longer there. There's a lot to digest there with the Arizona Cardinals as well, and there's still a lot of talent on that team, but without DeAndre Hopkins to begin the season, that's really going to limit their capabilities offensively. I mean, one of the better offensive players on that team, one of the better wide receivers in the league, when you're missing them, is not going to be easy. And this is the point that Murph and I were coming back to earlier this week on Green Bay. You articulated this perfectly. Aaron Rodgers is still there. He's still very much a top-tier quarterback in this league. But you know who's not there for the Green Bay Packers? Davante Adams. And this is a guy that is considered by many to be the de facto best wide receiver in the game right now. He's going to be out in Las Vegas catching passes from Derek Carr, which is going to make things more difficult on the Patriots when they face them on Sunday Night Football. So there's a lot to still go into this, but the ultimate point, and the point that I'm so glad that you made, and if we had one of those point ranking systems, it would have broke the meter off at that point, was this is why they play the games on the field, not on paper. We can prognosticate all we want to. It's fun. It's part of the job. Everybody has to do it. Fans love it, and the media loves to do it. But at the end of the day, you don't know what version of these teams you're going to be facing when it comes to this season. No. Cleveland may not have Deshaun Watson. Without him, are they a formidable opponent? Do they pose much of a threat to the New England Patriots? The Pittsburgh Steelers, like you said, do they go Pickett, or do they put Trubisky in there early on in the season? How does that change the dynamic? Indy is kind of like the media darling right now in terms of teams that could make that next step in the AFC, but you don't know how Matt Ryan is going to take to his new teammates either. Very seasoned quarterback, very good veteran quarterback, but in a new system this late in his career, not a slam dunk and not a given. So there are different ways to go and look about it. I agree with you. I think the Bengals may actually be, other than the Bills, I think the Bengals may be the toughest opponent that the Patriots have on this schedule right now, where barring any injury, you can count on a good effort from both sides of the ball. And especially that offense is really going to challenge this Patriots secondary. That late in the season, it's going to be a tough draw for the New England Patriots, especially if Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon are playing well. And if that offensive line is giving the protection that Joe Burrow needs, and having Ted Karras in there is going to be a big part of that. That could be a really tough draw. So I think I see the pout on Claire. We don't like when the Countess is displeased on this show, but Claire, I think Cole Strange and Michael Waino are going to do a decent job at guard. I think they're going to step up to the challenge, and at the very least, you can always hang your hat on some good tight endage, which the Patriots will once again be employing, and we talked about last week. But that is that last week, and this is this week, and I thank you once again, Countess, for lending your wisdom, your counsel, the way only you can here on Locked On Patriots. We have a lot of fun back and forth, and we kid each other, but I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I'm always honored to share the microphone with you, and I thank you for joining me here today and each and every Wednesday on Locked On Patriots. Folks, definitely check out the great work that Claire does. You can check out her Twitter feed, absolutely, at ClazzyClare. Always check her great work out, her written work at PatsPropaganda.com. Some great pieces up there from Claire and all the great writers they have over at Pats Propaganda. But I can't say it enough. A Claire Perspective of Patriots podcast is a phenomenal listen, folks. If you like the snippets of Claire that you get here each and every week, check that out. You will definitely not be disappointed. It's a phenomenal listen, one of my favorites, not just in Patriots media, but anywhere. I'll listen to that, whether I want to be entertained or whether I want to be informed. I always come away with both. Claire, what can I say? Thank you so much. Appreciate you, and I'm always honored to share the microphone with you.
No, thank you so much. As always, I love coming on to Locked On. It's lovely. The listeners and everything. I have so much fun. I get to talk about everything that I really want to talk about. It's great. And I get to talk about it with you, one of my most favorite Patriots people. she says
Oh,
eventually.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Too kind. Too kind. Too kind. But no, I thank you. I really do thank you for that. And speaking of which, we do appreciate all of the interactions that we get here on Locked On, whether it be from the Twitter account or whether it be through the YouTube comments. And good, bad, or indifferent, all the feedback is taken. It's definitely put into a place where we know you want to make the show better and we want to make the show better. And one of the best ways to do that is to answer some of your questions. And I know there are a lot of them out there. Folks, stay tuned to the Patriots Twitter account in the next couple of days because we'll be soliciting questions that Claire and I will be answering next week here on a special Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Patriots. That's right, the midweek mailbag comes back to Locked On Patriots finally, and myself and the Countess and Claz will be answering your questions. So make sure to get them in. Put the questions in the comments section on YouTube or on the Twitter account. One of the two, definitely make sure to submit those, and we'll do our best to get to them, each and every one of them, here on Locked On Patriots. But in the meantime, Countess, thank you very much for joining me here today. It's always been a blast. And most of all, folks, we want to thank you, the great listeners of Locked On Patriots, for all of your support and for making Locked On Patriots a daily part of your New England Patriots coverage and hopefully your first listen every day. On behalf of the esteemed, illustrious Countess of Claz herself, Claire Cooper, I'm Mike Debate. Stay safe, stay well, be the change you wish to see in the world. Have a great day, folks.